Hello guys, coming back at y'all with another Commander Top 10 video. This time we have Core Set 2019 to go over, and we have a lot of awesome cards for Commander. As expected with every single set now, we've been seeing a ton of support. As always for this set, we're going to be going over honorable mentions like we do with previous sets. First one I want to talk about here is Isolate. Out of a lot of the cards in the set, this might be the most competitive card we're talking about here. If you want to go and play competitive EDH, this is a card you probably want to consider. Being able to answer a good turn 1 play is almost as important as having a very good turn 1 play yourself. So while it's not a guarantee to see play in competitive EDH, it is possible. A lot of people are also considering it for other Eternal formats, which is not a bad idea. We have Detection Tower, which this is a worse Arcane Lighthouse or whatever that card is called, which is capable of taking away Shroud and Hexproof. So both keywords, this one just works for one of those keywords. So it is pretty much a worse version of the card, but since that card isn't as accessible, it's a little bit harder to get. So this is just yet another card that does something very similar to it, which isn't bad. It's a pretty underrated ability to have on the land. Scape Shift, not really going to see too much play in Commander. There are some strategies that really want to work with it. So hopefully this makes it cheaper, and it probably will. But definitely worth a mention because whatever decks are going to play it are going to work around with landfall or any sort of strategy like that. I'm mainly thinking about a deck like Omnath Locus of Rage. Not a bad idea there. We have Cleansing Nova, which is very similar to Austere Command. Austere Command does give you more flexibility. You can protect your own stuff by dealing with your opponent's artifacts. If you have all enchantments, you're not forced to destroy both. And same thing with creatures. You can choose to keep some creatures alive while you kill all the other ones. This one forces you to destroy all creatures, so you don't have as much flexibility, but you still have awesome options, destroying all artifacts or enchantments, which are pretty powerful permanent types in the format. Maybe not a standout board wipe. We have some pretty good ones like Hour of Revelation that have been released in the past year or so I'm not as quick to put this on the top 10 yet, but it's definitely worth it if you're desperate for a board wipe. Fraying Omnipotence, this one is very similar to Death Cloud, other similar cards like that. However, it does have the downside of not really affecting lands, which if you're playing Death Cloud, you want to play some sort of stack strategy. And part of that is resource denial. Getting rid of your opponent's lands is really what you want to do in resource denial. So it's probably going to see play, but maybe not as much play over something like a Death Cloud. And then we have Chromium the Mutable. This one, a lot of people like for Voltron. I'm not a big fan of Voltron. It's incredibly linear to me, not as enjoyable. 7 mana for a commander. You kind of have to build up to him, have a good setup. I'm still just not certain of how to build around him exactly that's satisfying and isn't just going to end up being a Voltron deck, but still worth being an honorable mention. Now we go on to the actual list here. We have number 10, which is Apex of Power. A whopping 10 mana in red, exile the top 7 cards of your library until end of turn. You may cast non-land cards exiled this way, but if this card was cast from your hand, you get to add 10 mana of any one color to your mana pool, which is pretty sweet. However, it does have that condition where you have to cast it from your hand, so it's the only reason why it's number 10. This might be higher if it did that regardless, because Storm is definitely a thing, both in casual EDH. If you want to make a casual Storm deck, those are possible, but these are mainly seen in competitive EDH. If you have a way to cheat this, maybe get this out there with something like an Omniscience, this could definitely be a powerful little combo with that card, because you do end up getting the mana that you would then need to cast the cards that are being exiled from the top of your library. But I think it's going to see play. I think it's just weird enough to inspire people to build decks around it. Not exactly certain, but it seems like a creative enough design, and it's super expensive, so I don't think it's as busted. It's not going to break the format. A really cool card. Number 9 is Nexus of Fate. Now, unfortunately, if you didn't get this as the buy a box, you're going to have to spend some more money to get it. It's not as accessible, which is the complaint that some people have for this buy a box promo in particular, but an extra turn card that doesn't exile itself. Pretty self-explanatory in the Commander format. There's a ton of decks that want to win by getting extra turns or even infinite turns at times, and having this in your library means that you can just keep tutoring it up. If you have any sort of strategy where you can get back to tutor, you can just keep playing this card over and over again, getting infinite turns. It's not anything like Time Warp, but still, any extra turn spell that doesn't exile itself is pretty valuable. Number 8 is Nicol Bolas the Ravager. I'm not the biggest fan of this guy, and I honestly think that they could have done more with him, but his impact in Commander is probably going to be there nevertheless, either as one of the 99 or as a commander himself. As far as the design of the card goes, it seems a bit lazy. There's nothing really unique about him. Forcing each of your opponents to discard a card is really cool, and that could work out really well if you want to build around that. But the cost to flip him just seems like you're paying 7 mana to get the Planeswalker. It's not really unique. There's no condition to flip him other than just paying that mana and doing that at sorcery speed. So as far as design goes, it's a bit lazy. The Planeswalker part is pretty typical of Nicol Bolas. You have really good loyalty abilities, and once you are able to ult him, you pretty much end a player's game. So very powerful. Usually these Nicol Bolas Planeswalkers are pretty powerful in Commander anyway, so his playability is going to be there. Number 7 is Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma. This guy's really cool. I could also see him in Animar, another pretty popular commander. But as a commander, I think he's also pretty good. You want to play good stuff green, this is the commander to do it with. You get some awesome cost reduction, and you get trample for your creatures. He's good in combat, he's good in setup. Cost reduction is always nice. Definitely just a solid green creature that we can work around with. Number 6 is Metamorphic Alteration. Now, if you're curious about the wording, it is a little weird at first. I didn't quite understand it, but this is an aura, so you're going to be enchanting a creature, and you're also choosing a creature when it enters the battlefield. So the creature that you're enchanting is going to become a copy of the creature that you choose, which may not be as good as some clones, but it's a completely different purpose. You can use this to completely nerf a creature. Let's say there's just a random token on the field. You put this on someone's commander and it becomes a copy of that token, which is really devastating because we have some things in the format like Darksteel Mutation, which are some of the only cards that are still around that can really deal with the commander without your opponents being able to use the tuck rule to get away from it. So having this as a way to get rid of a commander by making it a copy of a terrible creature, for the time being at least, they could always swing into someone and kill it and then they get their commander back. But it's still a great way to deal with your opponent's creatures. And you can also use this to make one of your weaker creatures much stronger. It could be your creatures that you can make it a copy of. It's versatile and I really like it. I think only 2 mana in blue. You don't really have the best removal options. You have Cyclonic Rift, Evacuation of course, but you don't really have the best ways of dealing with creatures other than bouncing them. This is definitely a way to do that now. Now we have Magistrate's Scepter, extra turns, extra turns. If you're able to get enough charge counters on this, this is going to get you an extra turn. The cool thing about it though is that we have a ton of things like Paradox Engine, infinite mana combos that are going to be able to make it to where you can get multiple counters on it. You also have Atraxis, so if you want to do this quicker, you can do that. Proliferate's a thing too. So it shouldn't be too unrealistic to get infinite turns with something like this in combination with Proliferate or infinite mana, Paradox Engine combos. Just a very powerful card. I think it's going to see a ton of play. Number 4, we have Vivictus Asmati the Dire. This guy is really sweet. It's on an attack trigger. Each player is going to sacrifice a permanent of your choice, so this is going to happen to you as well. So you're just going to sacrifice a permanent that you want the least, and then each player is going to reveal the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, it goes on the field. If it's not, I guess it just stays. This has a ton of potential. If you want to play Resource Denial, you could do that. If you just want to play Jund Control, you could do that. Very flexible ability here on the attack trigger. Definitely something I think is going to be underrated going into building and brewing with a lot of these commanders. Jund is a very strong color combination in Commander, with commanders like Prosh really dominating. And it's nice to see that we have yet another option in Jund that can be potentially as powerful as Prosh. Maybe not as powerful, but still really cool that we have a diverse option for the color pairings. The number 3, we have Arcades the Strategist. This is probably the most unique and, in my opinion, going to be the most fun to brew with out of all of the legendary creatures in this set. Very similar with how you want to play during the Siege Tower. The only difference is Arcades is much better. You have a card draw engine, you're playing blue, just the different colors alone open you up to playing competitive EDH if you so choose. While I don't think Arcades is going to be tier 1, you could definitely see some potential for competitive play. There's already combos with Paradox Engine as well as Intruder Alarm that you can work around with. Anything that can go infinite earlier in the game. Not a turn 3 or 4 win commander, but something that can definitely be at least a tier 2 commander in my opinion. Overall, Arcades is probably my favorite of the Elder Dragons. Number 2 is Crucible of Worlds / Omniscience. I'm not going to give both of these cards their own spot because I think their impact in the format is very close to being the same. I think Omniscience might be a little bit more popular in Commander, but I think it's because it's not as expensive as Crucible of Worlds at the moment. Crucible is going to go down, Omniscience is going to go down because of these reprintings, even if they are both mythics. Omniscience, casting whatever you want from your hand for free. There's the Enter the Infinite combo, of course, course, and you can just play Laboratory Maniac and then win the game. Crucible of Worlds sees a ton of play as well in Commander, because we also play fetch lands here. We have decks that are graveyard based, and a lot of that is going to end up dumping lands into your graveyard. So this at the very least is going to guarantee you a land drop every single turn for as long as it stays out, which is really nice. And landfall decks, Gitrog, anything that you want to work around with that's going to give you extra land drops, it's even better with Crucible of Worlds. And you could of course play stacks with Crucible of Worlds using something like a Strip Mine just to make your opponents miserable. Both really good, really well needed reprints, and it's nice that we finally get them. Number 1 is Tezzeret Artifice Master. This is a really good planeswalker, easily the best planeswalker in this entire set. I don't really think any of the other ones even come close. While he himself isn't super unique, he definitely stands out on power. His plus is going to give you a Thopter, which is going to count towards a 0, where you can then draw 2 cards if you have 3 or more artifacts, which on a 0 drawing 2 cards is also really good. So card advantage or creature presence to defend your Tezzeret, make sure that you can build that loyalty up, is really good, because once you are able to get to his ult, which is a pretty good ult, you can, at the beginning of each one of your end steps, you're going to get a permanent card. So it's basically planar bridge. So flavor wise it works out pretty well, because he did have something to do with the planar bridge in the lore. But obviously the best place for him is maybe not even an artifact deck, although I think he's going to work out well obviously in an artifact deck. I think most Tezzerets do anyway. He's going to be perfect for Super Friends, especially any sort of combo oriented version of Super Friends where you can easily just get out a doubling season and then play him, and then you immediately have a very powerful ult, which is going to work with your other planeswalkers, getting them out even quicker. Just a really awesome card here, gonna fit into a lot of decks, even if it's not necessarily artifact based. But anyway guys, that's gonna do it for this top 10 list. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know what you think about other cards that maybe I missed the potential for. You guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.